Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone from Galveston. Thank you all for joining us today. Welcome to Strategies for Student Engagement in OER. I think we've got a pretty exciting day today. My name is Dave Baca. I use he, his pronouns. I'm the library director at A&M Galveston, and I'm really thrilled to welcome you. Looking really forward to our presentations and discussions. If you could take the next slide. Today's webinar is co-hosted by the Texas Council on Academic Libraries and the Texas Digital Library. I want to thank the board of TCAL for their hard work on behalf of academic libraries. And I also want to thank TDL, Christie Park, and especially Leah DeForest for offering their support and coordinating and producing this. And of course, our wonderful presenters today. Let's cover a little bit of housekeeping today. We've enabled captioning. You can turn on captioning, use the icon on the toolbar at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Please keep your microphones muted until our Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Presenters will also keep their mics muted until it's their turn to speak. We hope you'll use the chat box, not only to tell us that you're here and to say hello, but also share resources, make comments throughout. Leah's going to be monitoring the chat for us. If you have a question, just please type it into chat. And once we get to the end of the session, we'll start covering those. Of course, if you need to take a break, this is a 90-minute session. I'm sure if you need to take a break, just do so. This will be recorded so that you can come back to it. We have a community notes document and a handout with lots of information and recommended readings from our committee and today's speakers that we'll share in chat. Leah? We at the Texas Digital Library and TCAL are dedicated to providing an experience for everyone that's free from all forms of harassment, inclusive of all people. We ask everyone here today to be considerate and respectful in your speech and actions, attempt collaboration before conflict, refrain from demeaning, discriminatory, or harassing behavior in speech, and be mindful of your environment and your fellow participants. I also want to remind you that we're going to try to have some fun here. So laughing, smiling, and having fun is highly encouraged, and we hope you all feel welcome to engage in today's discussion whenever it makes you comfortable to do so. Okay. This webinar came from discussions that we had in the Texas Council of Academic Libraries about supporting the state and our academic libraries, and with conversations with Christy and Leah. But it also follows on an interesting student panel at the recent Open Texas conference that Nathan was a big part of. So a big thank you to our presenters today. With us today, we have Madeline Thompson, the immediate past Assistant Vice President for Academic Affairs for the student government at Texas A&M in Galveston. She's also graduating in a few days to move on to work for her on her PhD. And she has been very instrumental in leading OER awareness efforts on campus. We also have Dr. Nathan Smith, who's a philosophy instructor and the OER coordinator at Houston Community College. He's guided the launch of their Z degree program in 2017 and co-founded the Houston Area OER Consortium in 2018. Recently, he was the co-chair of that program committee for the Open Texas 2021. And Ashley Morrison has been the Tocker Open Education Librarian at the University of Texas at Austin since August of 2020. Ashley works with faculty, staff, and students across campus to drive the awareness and adoption of OER and other free and affordable course materials at UT Austin. And she also represents UT Austin as the TDL OER ambassador. Today, we'll have a 90-minute session. We're going to start off with a little bit of an icebreaker and fun, led by Madeleine, followed by a portion of time given to all three presenters to share their experiences engaging students in OER. Again, we'll have at the end of the session some Q&A and open discussions. But our first activity is to test a little bit of your OER knowledge. start us thinking about OER and student engagement. So I will turn it over to Madeleine to lead that.
Hello, everybody. I'm Madeleine. I use she, her pronouns. And I'm going to share my screen and kind of go through what we are going to be doing today. So we're going to have two activities. The first is a Kahoot, and the second is a Jamboard. So first, we're going to do the Kahoot. So if you could go to this website, I'm going to put it in the chat as well, either on your laptop or your phone. I find it on the phone is a little bit easier because if you do it on your laptop, you'll have to move back and forth between the Kahoot and the Zoom. So to look at the answers and the questions. And I'm going to send the game code in the chat as well. So you'll enter that game code and then you'll select the answer that you think is correct on your device. And like I said, on your device, it'll be a color and a shape that corresponds to the answers that are on like the Zoom screen. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up the Kahoot. And then when everybody is in, I will go ahead and start. You have 30 seconds to answer the questions. But yeah, and we'll go from there. Okay, is that everybody? Yes. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start the game. Okay. So the first question is, when was the term open education resource first coined? We have 2002, 1999, 2008, and 2012. Yeah, so the correct answer was 2002. All right. So it was first used at a forum organized by UNESCO on an open courseware and higher education. Next question. What % of students do not purchase textbooks? We have 25%, 45%, 65%, and 85%. %65%. So 65% of college students say that they have not bought a textbook because it was too expensive, and even in some cases have done so even though they were worried that the decision would hurt their grade. Next question. From 2006 to 2016, how much did the cost of textbooks increase? 28%, 48%, 68%, or 88%? %88, which is a whole lot. So the Bureau of Labor Statistics estimates that from 2006 to 2016, the cost of textbooks increased 88%. And the last question, In the 2019-2020 school year, what was the average cost of textbooks and supplies per student? $1,200, $1,200, or $1,500? $1,200. So according to the most recent survey from the College Board, the average full-time on-campus undergraduate at a four-year school was estimated to have spent $1,240 on books and supplies during the 2019-2020 school year. All right, so the podium in third place, we have Tessie. Woo. And in second place, Kay. And in first place is Gabby. Yay, congrats. All right, so then our next game is going to be a jam board. So I'm going to post the link in the chat. And sorry. So if you want to click on that link, we'll use the sticky note function that's on the left-hand side of the screen. It's the fourth icon down. You'll type whatever you want to and press save. And then you can click the select icon, the third icon down, to click and drag your sticky note to move it on the board. I will move my, okay, here's the Jamboard. So the first question is, a student government vice president comes to you with an interest in helping students with OER. So what advice do you give them? So yeah, y'all can just type away on the Jamboard. This is some great advice, yeah. Okay, awesome. So if everybody's ready, we're going to move on to the next question. So if you go to the top of the Jamboard, it says 1-2, and you're going to click onto the next frame, and it'll come up with the next question. You'll use the same sticky note function to type in your answers. So who are your OER champions on campus? This can be faculty, this can be an organization, whoever on campus is your OER champion.
Wow, these are great. I'm glad we've captured all this. This will be something we can, we'll be able to take forward with these. A lot of librarians in there. Go figure.
All right, this is awesome.
Okay, thank you, Madeline. I appreciate it. Okay, next on our agenda is Nathan. Talk a little bit about his experience. Turn it over to you, Nathan.
Okay, cool. So should be showing my slides here, and somebody let me know in the chat if, okay, thank you. I actually appreciate that. All right, so my name is Nathan Smith, and I use the he, him pronouns, and I represent HCC, and I've helped start this Z degree or zero cost textbook program that we have at HCC. So we're going to talk about some of the ways that we have engaged students and ways that students have been proactive and really instrumental in kind of getting our OER efforts off the ground at HCC. So I would say, first of all, that one of the things that I found is that student voices have a big impact with administrators and with your board of trustees. So one of the things that really helped, I think, create momentum towards a college-wide, a system-wide approach to OER was in 2016, we had a group of students who were members of the Student Library Association Council. So they were like an advisory or association associated with the library. And they became really concerned about textbook costs. They had even sort of created a shelf within the library where people donated used textbooks and students could check out textbooks for an entire semester. And it was just one way they were trying to reduce the cost of textbooks for other students. But they came forward as a concerned citizen report at a Board of Trustees meeting in 2016. And that had a big impact on our Board of Trustees. And it also alerted all of the top level administrators as soon as they appeared on the agenda. people were alerted. And so I think that just raised the profile of it instantly. We had created a committee that was exploring OER, but I think that really put fuel behind that. And in the next year, we completed an application for a grant program and eventually got a grant. And by 2017, we had launched the Z degree. So I see this as a catalyzing event for us. We also have engaged our Student Government Association. So the top picture there is Christine Monpoint, who's our current president of our Student Government Association. And she is just an outstanding speaker and sort of advocate for students. She understands textbooks. She's now working with OpenStax as a student advisor. And she's just I picked these pictures of a couple of students because I want to shout out just their voices and what they've done to advocate for OER. We also have at HCC, we did a program called Basic Needs. We were kind of inspired by the work of Sarah Goldrick-Rab on the costs of college and the sort of hardship that some students are facing with just meeting their basic needs of housing and food. And I want to shout out a couple of students, Justice Butler and Jamaica Mills, who are former students of HCC, but both of them experienced homelessness during the period of their going through college and just prior to college. And they came through that, and their stories are really inspiring. This shot below is of a film called Invisible that Justice Butler actually did, documenting kind of her experiences. And that we've tied that in with OER and some of our efforts, like to do a food pantry and address other basic needs of students. And I think that's been a really helpful sort of message to collaborate with. The other thing we do is basically kind of an outreach and marketing effort. So we have a marketing landing page on our website, just hccs.edu/Z degree. Couple of basic videos there, tell students about how to search for low-cost textbooks and zero-cost textbooks. And we have a student interest form. So students who land on the page can indicate that they're interested in the program. That fills out a form. I can then get the list of information, and I can communicate with students through email to follow up with them. We also do every registration period, we do a social media outreach, basically with the tagline, save up to $1,000 on textbooks. The idea being that if a student were to take all of their classes in the Z degree or using zero-cost books, that they could save that estimated cost that we saw that the College Board estimates, around $1,200 per year for total textbooks and materials costs. So that's kind of our slogan that we bring students in with, and we link them back to this landing page. Another thing that I think actually is really useful, and everybody in Texas now is doing this, so I encourage you to think about using the power of course markings to help attract students to your OER efforts. So we have our PeopleSoft catalog, and we identify our course materials as L, low cost, that's less than $40, Z, that's zero cost, $0. And we also have a tag for our inclusive access program, that's the S there. So those bubbles appear when you do a course search in the schedule. And there's a little, when you hover over the orange bubbles you see there, there's a little couple sentences description of what that means. But one of the things that we built in early on that I worked with IT to build is a tracker. So essentially, anytime a student does a search on our class search page, and they filter by that low cost designator, we call it textbook savings. So if they were to select that filter, it captures the time and the search and the student ID and information and their email. And then obviously then we can get their major, and then we can see if they actually enrolled in a course. And all of that information is helpful to me because then I can reach out to students who were clearly interested in saving money on textbooks, and I can try to communicate with them afterwards. We also do an annual survey of students. I think this is important just to see what students think about textbooks. I'm sorry, I've got a lot of data on this, but I'll just go through. Basically, this is a few years of findings. They're pretty consistent across the board. What we find is that students do prefer printed textbooks to online or digital textbooks. At about 50% say they strongly agree or agree with the statement that they would prefer those textbooks. But once you introduce cost savings to that, their preferences flip. And suddenly if you say, well, what if you could get that digital textbook for free? We get up into 80% students saying, well, yeah, I'll take the digital textbook. So what I take from this is that students do like print. I think we are sometimes led to believe that because this is a digital generation, that they're at home reading and studying with digital materials, and that's not always the case. But they are very price conscious. And so they are very sensitive to if you're going to give them discounts on these sorts of things. We started asking whether students couldn't purchase a textbook, and our numbers are slightly lower than the national numbers that Madeleine cited earlier, but we're seeing about, a quarter of our students are unable to purchase saying they're unable to purchase textbook because of the cost. And some of them are unable to purchase it, or they delay their purchase because they have a delay in receiving financial aid. And that's another thing that we try to talk about with OER, that it's available on the first day of class, and every student has access to the same materials. And then, of course, you see the cost of what our students are spending. It has gone down a little bit in recent years, but close to 40% are spending greater than $300 per semester. And you have to recognize that that's at HCC, where a course for in-district is less than $300. A 3-credit course is less than $300. Most of our students are part-time. So that number there is pretty significant. The final thing I want to talk about is just how I train faculty on using OER, and I do a number of online training courses, and these are some of the topics that we cover. But I want to focus on the idea of open educational practices and open pedagogy, because I think that's a way to engage students with the concept of OER, and understanding that the open license frees up new opportunities for them to engage with their instructional content. So here's an example from my class. I teach an intro to ethics class, and I do a personal project in that class. So all my materials are OER. The personal project, what I ask the students to do is to imagine that they are writing for another student, like a future student in the class. What would they add to the textbook or the course materials that could help that student? And so then they go through a process. We do a proposal, we do a draft, and they submit a final. And then what happens is they choose a license if they want to, or we default to the CC BY license. And then basically I take excellent examples and I embed them back into the course. So here's now a course page where I've taken products of student work, and they're now part of the teaching and instructional materials that students use, that students have access to in the course. So a lot of times it's videos, might be a voiceover PowerPoint, an infographic. This one student did a great little web comic summarizing one of the readings that we did. So students are just so creative, and they want to get engaged in the class. And I think it's really fun as a professor to kind of see what they're capable of. Sometimes they're just, some of the things they come up with are just really, really inspiring. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Nathan. I would encourage everyone, again, put your questions into chat, and Leah will kind of get them all together and we can address them at the end of the session. Now I'd like to turn it over to Ashley Morrison. Thank you, Ashley.
Thanks, Dave. Just a moment. I'm going to get my screen shared with you all. And you should be seeing my presentation right now. Thumbs up from anybody if you can see it. Great. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Ashley Morrison. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Tocker Open Education Librarian at the University of Texas at Austin. And I am still relatively new in my role, hired in August of last year. And this is the very first time that UT has had an open education librarian. My charge is to advance the awareness and adoption of OER all across campus, and I work with faculty, staff, students, all kinds of partners to do that. I'm obviously going to focus today on what that work looks like, most with our students, but I also want to note that since I'm new, I'm going to be relaying a lot of efforts that began way before I started in my position. And that makes sense because partnering with students is a long-term play. That's one of the things to take away from today. But before I jump in, I believe that we've got a short Zoom poll just to check in with everyone today on one question. Leah, do you mind queuing that up?
Got it. Just one sec.
Sure, thank you.
There you go.
Thank you. So hopefully you're seeing this poll right now. The question that we have today is, who all has a campus working group or a committee that's dedicated to OER? And you can let us know by chiming in on the poll, or if you want to elaborate, feel free to use the chat to do that. We'll give just a minute. We still got a few responses rolling in. All right, I think we're probably about there. I'm going to end the polling so that I can show you what the results look like. So what you can see here is that for a lot of folks, yes, you have some kind of working group or committee, and you've had one for a while. That's almost half of attendees today. You've also, in some cases, just gotten one started. And for a lot of you, you are flying solo right now. So congratulations on making it happen with one person. But I'm asking this question because I'm going to talk, as I mentioned today, about work that's been happening on my campus for a long time with students. And most of that work has come through our OER working group on campus. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. So a little bit about my institutional context. I know a lot of people are probably familiar with UT Austin, but we're a public land grant institution. We are designated as R1, so we've got a high level of research output, and that might tell you a little bit about the priorities of our more than 3,000 teaching faculty, in some cases on research over teaching or service. We've got 18 colleges and schools, so collectively more than 300 degree programs. And each semester we offer over 12,000 courses. So that also says a little bit about the challenges of scaling outreach on this campus, though I know that a lot of you are in really similar situations. We have about 51,000 undergraduate and graduate students, and out of those, more than 34,000 receive some form of financial aid, with about 10,000 as Pell Grant recipients. And that number is growing each year. So that's a little bit about our institution. So while I do have many interactions with students, my colleagues and I primarily partner with two formal groups of students on campus. So that's the Senate of College Councils and the Natural Sciences Council. And notably, neither of these are the General Student Government Association, which on our campus has a much broader charge than either of these groups do. So the Senate of College Councils covers each of the 18 schools and colleges that I mentioned before, and their mission is on the academic side of campus life. They work really closely with our faculty council and other administrative bodies on academic related agendas. And OER has been a part of that for SCC for several years now. And they've been working directly with UT libraries and the working group that I mentioned for OER to draft OER related legislation that I'm going to take a look at with you in just a moment. But they've been doing that since 2019, although our relationship with that group predates that. And then Natural Sciences Council is a smaller body that represents just those students in the College of Natural Sciences. And I believe that's our biggest school by enrollment. They serve as the liaison between students and administration in that college. And most of the students that I regularly work with in that are also part of the Senate of College Councils as in SC representatives. So there's a lot of crossover when we talk, and it's not always super clear in which capacity they're acting, but that hasn't been super important to us to date. So the legislation that I mentioned, this gets passed by the Senate of College Councils. And so far at UT, there have been 3 resolutions related to OER or other types of affordable course materials. And these include, starting in 2019, Senate Resolution 1808, which was in support of UT Libraries' advocacy for open education resources. There was 1911, which was last year in 2020, and this was in support of the creation of a university-wide OER faculty award program. And then very recently, as in 2 weeks ago or so, we had Resolution 2103, which is a resolution in support of requiring that low-cost course status be displayed on the university's course schedule. So this is going to sound familiar because it's what Nathan showed you before, how students at HCC can search directly in their course schedule for courses with free or low cost or inclusive access designations. We've been doing that a little bit differently at UT, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later, but this would represent progress on that front. What I want to note, though, is that resolutions are pretty limited in their power. They often just express support for something, but they can be the start of discussions with administration that make a difference. And each seems, in my experience so far, to really build on the power of others. So the student leaders that I work with are usually parlaying that general support into making some specific requests. And a recent example of this includes the meetings that some natural sciences council students have been taking with administration in their college and at the campus level to get more information on what changes could be made to the college's tenure and promotion policy to directly acknowledge OER adoption or creation, which hasn't happened to date. And really excitingly to me personally, the president of the Senate of College Councils used her opportunity as part of the president's student advisory board to make a direct ask to give the libraries money for a mini grant pilot program that would support the adoption and creation of OER. And she got a verbal confirmation in that same meeting for some limited funding to help us with a pilot like that. So that was really exciting news for us because we've been trying to get that done for a long time. And this fall, student leaders have scheduled a meeting with the new campus registrar to ask about what specific next steps can be taken to get those free and low-cost course designations integrated into the course schedule. So this meeting and the one with the president are ones that would have taken me a very long time, if ever, frankly, to get. And the asks, in my opinion, are so much more effective when they come directly from our students. So the one initiative that I wanted to get a little bit more in depth on today is our Affordable Education Champions program, which cost us nothing but time to launch. A group of librarians who are part of that OER working group I mentioned before worked with the students who represented both the Senate and the Natural Sciences Council that we talked about before to very, very quickly design and launch a faculty recognition campaign, which you probably saw was one of the resolutions passed by the Senate back in 2020. And previously, we'd pursued options for a program that would have a monetary award, but when we hit some, let's call it bureaucratic walls with that, we pivoted to a less formal program that coincided with Open Education Week in March. So we asked students to nominate any instructor who assigned free or low-cost course materials, and we let students decide what low cost meant to them, though all of our nominations ended up being for instructors who were using free materials. And when I said that we did this quickly, I really mean that. We talked about it first about a month before Open Education Week, which I think in an ideal scenario would have been plenty of time, but then we unexpectedly lost about 2 weeks to the winter storms back in February. So what we put together ended up happening in about 2 weeks, and we worked together, so the OER working group and our students, to design a Google form for soliciting nominations from students and developing some FAQs to support the program. And then our students did all the real work of creating some graphics for the campaign, promoting the nomination form and the program overall to their followers on social media and on their college email lists. And they engaged organizations like the Natural Sciences Council within each of those colleges to do that effectively. So the nomination period only ended up being about a week long, though we'd initially planned for it to be 2 weeks, winter storm problems again. And I feared that because of this, we'd only get a couple of nominations, but we ended up with 28 unique faculty nominated across 6 of our colleges. And honestly, we had a really hard time evaluating them because all of the nominations were so strong. So to me, it's clear that the students who were involved in this did an excellent job getting the word out. And then to evaluate the nominations, I sat out so that I could be the person to blind all of the nominee information. So removing personally identifiable details and specific course information. And then each of the reviewers, which were librarians and students, submitted their evaluations of those nominations through another Google form. Then we had a meeting live to review the scoring and make final selections. So ultimately, we selected 5 total faculty, 1 to promote during each day of a week of celebration. And the graphics that you see at the bottom of this page were created by the students, and they were shared on social media with their college email lists again. And I wrote blog posts for each of the selected faculty on the UT Library's website, featuring quotes from their students and from the awardees themselves. And they were all really happy to be recognized, but everyone was super adamant that they did this, that is selected free materials, because they care a lot about student affordability and getting them the right course material. They're not doing it for the awards. But we did also send letters of recognition signed by our library's vice provost to each of their deans. So this is an example that I wanted to share because while it was unintentionally crammed into a really short planning period, it didn't cost us anything to do. And it was a really productive collaboration between some very engaged students and the OER working group. And we've all agreed that it was so successful that we'll be running it again every year. So we're starting early now and talking about what next spring could look like. I'm going to drop a little link into the chat in case you're interested in looking at some more details about that program. But what will it look like next time? Most of the opportunities for improvement that we identified were strictly related to timing. We'll start the planning process much earlier and give ourselves more time for each stage, pending any other natural disasters. But another thing coming out of this that I think is very cool is that the Natural Sciences Council is using their faculty nominee pool to give out more awards at their annual faculty and staff appreciation banquet, which I believe will also carry a nominal monetary award. I mentioned our OER working group, of course, a couple of times, and starting this fall, we'll be including a student in that group for the first time. We invited the president-elect of the Natural Sciences Council to join this group of what has been so far staff and faculty, and we know that we're really going to benefit from their involvement. And if you're curious about what our OER working group does, I'm going to drop another link into chat that you can check out if you're interested. And similarly, if we're able to get our mini grant OER adoption or creation pilot off the ground this year, we are, I think, very likely to include a student leader in the application review process. And I'm also really interested in developing more relationships like the one that we have with natural sciences in other colleges. We met a few of those students through the Affordable Education Champions review process, and I think that we could really scale our success on some of the biggest needs by getting these students engaged in the conversation too. Finally, I just wanted to end by recapping a few pieces of advice that I have for engaging students in OER work. First, it's really helpful to identify a champion, finding a student who can get others motivated to act. And sometimes they have positional power, but they don't always. On the ideation side, student leaders are often looking for very specific programs that align with their affordability platforms, and OER fits into this really well. So reaching out directly to students who in new positions of leadership, especially if you've seen that affordability was part of their platform, is useful. On the data side of things, I think one of the reasons that our president of the Senate of College Councils was successful in making the pitch to our president for some funding was that we gave them a lot to work with in terms of being able to craft a persuasive argument. We gave them numbers and examples that they could fit into that pitch. And that wasn't the only reason. I think they would have been very successful on their own too, but I think that it made them feel more confident in making that ask. And finally, students do turn over every few years. Ideally, they have to leave us at some point. So progress on these initiatives can be slower than student life. So I try to prepare them for that likelihood and make sure that they identify successors for any initiatives that they have in progress before they leave their positions. So those are some of the specific tips that I have to offer. So thank you for listening to that. I'm looking forward to Q&A later, but I wanted to leave you with my email address too, just in case you ever wanted to follow up with any particular questions, and I'll drop that into chat as well. But thanks. I'm going to turn it over, I think, to Madeleine, but I'll let Dave get us started.
Thank you, Ashley. That was great. Keep the questions and comments coming. In the meantime, we'll turn it over to Madeline Thompson. Talk about her experience.
Okay, I'm gonna share my screen again. Hello, I'm Madeline again. I'm a senior at Texas A&M University at Galveston. I'm the Student Government AVP of Academic Affairs, and I also am a writing tutor in the Center for Academic Learning Support. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about the student's perspective on OER. So I first got involved in OER when I became the AVP of Academic Affairs in the fall. It was something that our current president, who was our AVP of Academic Affairs at the time, brought up to me and said that some students had an interest in it and were looking for free textbooks. But I really wasn't sure what OER was until it was brought to my attention. So then that's when I started meeting with Dr. Baca and started getting the ball rolling. The main difference that we saw was before COVID, our OER task force was mostly faculty. And then once student government got involved kind of post-COVID and during COVID was mostly student-led through the Academic Affairs Committee. There's 7 of us. So with Dr. Baca, we have a pretty big committee working on OER. We also saw a lot more financial struggles from students. So the initiative for OER became more present. And a lot more students wanted to know more about OER and learn about these free textbooks and resources. But our overall goal is basically to educate faculty and students on what OER is and try to initiate that on our campus. So in April of this year, we conducted a survey at A&M Galveston. We surveyed about 86 students. Our campus is like 2,000 students, so that's a pretty big chunk of our campus. And the first question was whether students would like to have more classes that were OER. Before this question, we actually explained what OER was and what we could do with OER, and a lot of students didn't really know what OER is. But once they were explained, 96% said yes, that they would like to have more OER classes. And then 4% said maybe, but nobody said no, so that's good. The next one is whether students would pick a course based on whether it would have free or a low-cost textbook. And 66% said yes, 20% said maybe, and about 15% said no. But the majority of our students did said that they would pick courses based on whether it was free or low-cost textbooks. And the last question we asked is whether, like what courses that they have taken or previously took that would, that they would like to be OER. And the majority of our students said chemistry, physics, and the math classes, which are pretty basic and required by most of the students that come to our school. And there's a lot of OER textbooks on these subjects. So we talked to faculty about this, and we are trying to lower the cost of these educational materials that they use for these classes, and it has been pretty successful. But overall, we see that students who can't afford textbooks are just not buying them, giving them a disadvantage to students that can afford them. And students don't really have many hesitations about OER, and they want it to be implemented. They just don't know that it exists. But some of our next steps at A&M Galveston is to collect data on each class, identify the resources that are readily available for faculty, and to work with faculty to adopt and implement these OER texts. And that is all that I have. Thank you so much. And thank you for letting me be here and speak with y'all.
Thank you, Madeline. That was wonderful. I think we're going to move over to answering people's questions. Leah, did you want to lead that? Do you want to?
Yeah, Dave,
Give the
let me
questions.
grab some of those questions that were asked in chat.
And
And
if you would, keep putting questions in there and we'll see if we can get to them.
yeah, we had some questions around kind of thinking back to Nathan's presentation from Houston Community College. And there was a question from Angela for Nathan. Do you get permission from students to use their creations in your course? And if so, is it written permission?
Yeah, that's a good question. So and sorry I missed your question there, Angela. So what I do in the module on personal projects is I do introduce them to the idea of an open license, and I don't spend a ton of time on it but it is a new concept for students. What I basically say to them is that unless you you're free to tell me that you don't want to share this, or that the work is copyrighted with all rights reserved to you, but otherwise I'm going to assume that it's CC BY. And so the whole assignment is set up with this idea that it would be shared with others. Oftentimes what I'll do is I'll notify a student after the semester is over to let them know that, oh, hey, I liked your presentation and want to share it. Sometimes that involves them having to change the way that they have posted the information. So for instance, like if they create a YouTube video, they have to license it in a way that allows me to embed the video content. But yeah, that's generally how it works. It kind of goes, it's a back and forth. I don't have an explicit consent form or some kind of written consent that they have to do.
Very cool. And David had a question for Ashley about following up on your Affordable Champions. Has the nomination and recognition program that you've developed there led more faculty to moving to OER?
Yeah, that's a great question, Dave. I think that time will tell on this. We just did this in March, so it's been a couple of months, but I think that something really promising I heard when we presented faculty with their awards by email right now, since that's the best option we have in our current circumstances. We copied their department chairs, and in many cases, their department chairs then shared the good news with the rest of their department. And I heard from our faculty awardees that they were getting questions from colleagues within their department about what this means and what are OER, or how did they get to the point that they did? How did they find free materials or create free materials? So I think that early response is a positive one that could long-term lead to more faculty adopting OER or other types of free materials. So fingers crossed. I'll be happy to report back out if we do see meaningful movement from that.
That's great. And kind of piggybacking on that sense, Nathan, you talked about a social media campaign as well. Did you get a good response? Could you talk about your response that you get with that social media campaign?
I wish I had, so our communications department tracks things like click-throughs and read receipts of emails and stuff like that. So I wish I had those numbers, but I don't. What I can say is that every semester, I get hundreds of new names of students that sign up on our form. So they're at least going through the process. And then on the course markings thing, I'm seeing, thousands of searches that are using the filter for textbook savings every semester. And we just started tracking it like 2 semesters ago. So, that word is getting out. So, yeah, that's what we see some good feedback. I mean, I think it's, I think the challenge for me is always like you get the initial reach out and maybe you have an email communication, but are that really resulting in an enrollment in the course? And it's very difficult to figure that out. And I also think it's really hard to do. So yeah.
Nathan, on the course markings, do the faculty designate that on the system as OER, or does someone from outside click that box?
That is in art institution, that's the chair's responsibility, and it happens during the process of scheduling and ordering textbooks. Excuse me. So basically, you know, when they're doing the schedule, inputting the schedule, they can tag the course with a course attribute, and at the time that they're creating the schedule, they are communicating with the faculty about what textbooks they want. And so faculty can then indicate to them, you know, this is a zero cost books course or an OER course, or I'm using mostly OER, but you know, they're required to purchase this thing that makes it low cost. So a lot of times it's like a OER courseware platform, or maybe it's a primary source book, like a monograph that they're supplementing their textbook with. And you know, so that's kind of yeah, so that's it's the chair's responsibility to tag it, and then I just track it and make sure that I don't see names of faculty that I don't know. And if I see faculty drop off, I usually send an email to them and say, hey, I know, you know, you typically use OER, but I didn't see your courses tagged. A lot of times it's that they just didn't get tagged, so it's a lot of follow-up.
I'll bet. This is a question for Madeleine, and again, your student perspective is really valuable here. And so we want to know if you have a succession plan in place, and who's going to take over the OER initiatives after you graduate.
Yeah, definitely. So the person who is taking over the OER initiatives is the next AVP of Academic Affairs. She was my co-chair for the Academic Affairs Committee this year, and she's been pretty involved in what we have been doing behind the scenes. But she has access to, we created a shared Google Drive, so she has access to all of the information that I have shared with others, and all the information that I have received. So she has all the resources available to her. And we've talked heavily about what the next steps for OER is with SGA.
Yeah, we have a whole other half an hour scheduled today. Excuse me. And so we can keep going with Q&A, and I also would invite anyone on the call who has other tips for engaging students with your OER work on your campuses to speak up and share those with the group.
Part of exploring this topic is a selfish reason, because I'm looking for other ideas on ways to engage students as well. So you can just do all my work for me if you would, please.
Leah, can I jump in?
Always.
Thanks. Sorry, guys. Yeah, I was wondering, people usually frame OERs in terms of cost savings, and there's not a student on the planet that's ever going to say, wow, that's a bad thing, right? But OERs also represent this move towards open education, where new things can be done in and out of the classroom that might not be possible. It sounded like, Nathan, you were getting there or doing that. I was wondering if people have explored changing the way that we teach and educate students with students, so that they become masters of their own educational process to any degree, maybe conversations or experiments or anything like that.
Well, I'll jump in. Since you mentioned me, Bruce.
Yeah. I had to jump onto another call, so I missed some of your talk.
Oh, no worries.
Apologize, but it sounded like you were doing it. So
Yes, I mean, I try to implement some student engagement activities or open pedagogy activities in my own class, and and when I teach faculty about OER, we have a online training course, and I try to emphasize the importance of open pedagogy, or using or sometimes using the open license to change the way you teach effectively. And so I would say, like, at HCC, in fact, we recently had a request from Achieving the Dream. They're doing a follow-up study on their OER degree initiative stuff. They have some great studies, by the way. I'll post this in the chat for folks that are interested. But they are looking specifically at this question, they're doing a qualitative study of, like, how have faculty changed teaching practices when they're using OER. So they'll be doing site visits and focus groups and kind of observing classes and stuff like that. And so I sent out an email to my faculty list of OER users and people who are interested in OER. And I got back, I would say, like a dozen replies, and we have like 7 or 8 to 10 faculty who I think are really doing interesting work. I mean, so it's a small population, I would say, at this time, even at HCC, where we've been kind of have had a system-wide effort for a few years. But the other thing I'm hearing from faculty is like, oh, I'm meaning to do that, maybe next semester. So, people are aware of it. I think it's just so challenging to change our pedagogical practices. We've been taught a certain way. It's so much easier to just continue doing the thing that you've been doing. It's really hard to change the way you engage with students. But I think that's the real payoff for sure. I agree with you, Bruce.
Yeah. You can reach students that are traditionally not well served by current practices with new and better teaching. You can recruit more students. I'm talking to a friend of mine who teaches at a small school in South Carolina, and their enrollment has dropped like 30%. And so they're closing departments, firing faculty. And he was in charge of the faculty committee looking for new things the faculty could do to try to help and support the institution. And interestingly, their report included nothing about like improving teaching so that student success is better, that less students drop out, that you'd have a story to tell potential students you might recruit. Madeleine and David, I've been at College Station for an amazingly long period of time. And so I've seen the growth of Texas A&M Galveston. And it didn't have much of an undergraduate program when I first got there. It was really just a place to dock the oceanography a ship, right? And graduate programs when I first got to A&M. But that's a school that really has blossomed because you've had a story to tell potential students about the programs you have and the kind of the quality. And OER and open education can be part of that. So.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, we do, and the way we're finally moving, I think it's going to be exciting, especially with this campus. We're very science heavy here, so I think any kind of OER changes we can make are going to have a huge impact on our students. Nathan, I wanted to just say something about the course marking. Our system is all run through College Station as far as the actual system, but we leave it up to each faculty member to designate whether they are OER. And we do a marketing campaign of, if you are, please click that so that students will know. Of course, it's a state mandate that you have to do that, but it doesn't always happen. And this may get into a little bit of a data thing, but we are trying to figure out, just the extent of OER on campus. And kind of our 3 ways of doing that is to talk with the bookstore, see who's still charging for required textbooks and materials. Look at that list of classes that are self-designated for OER. And then we've put out responses for faculty to just tell us, which doesn't work very well. So we've resorted to basically going through every syllabus of every course that we don't already know about and seeing if they are requiring textbooks that have expenses. It takes a lot of work to do that. What are my alternatives?
Oh man, I totally share your pain. We did a research study at a couple years ago to see if there was an impact on student success with our zero cost textbooks program. And so I wanted to make sure that we were absolutely correct in identifying the courses. I didn't want to, on either side, I didn't want to have people in our control that were not charging for textbooks, and I didn't want to have people in our zero cost that were. So yeah, I went through all this. So we had go through syllabi, and I had an assistant that was able to do a lot of that, but it's just extremely time consuming. I think, like, as with a lot of things, I find like this is really just a change of culture. It's kind of like people have got to, understand the value of putting that information out there, and then understand the process, and then get in the habit of doing it. And I don't, because you can't, unless you have a very centralized system where, like, for instance, just as an example, like Colorado Community College Online, they have, they do massive course designs, and every faculty member teaches basically from the same course. There, right? So if you centralize all of it or mandate certain parameters for what you teach, then it's much easier to track. But I think for a place like Galveston, or a place like most of the folks on the call, like, I don't think that works for us, right? We really want to allow faculty to choose the materials that they want. We don't want to restrict faculty freedom for all the reasons that we were just talking about, for pedagogy and all that stuff and engagement. So, so then the only thing, so then you really do have to rely on people to do it. I don't know how else. I really don't. Sorry.
I did that survey at Texas A&M in College Station by going through 10 majors for the 4 years, by going through all their syllabi. And I found that faculty were using some kind of free something or other, something maybe they cobbled it together, or maybe it really was an OER in about 15 to 20%, 15% of the classes, somewhere around there. And they're often, those early adopters are kind of idealists ahead of the curve, and they're finding their own way. Our challenge, if we're going to spread it farther, is to work with faculty that they also might share those ideals, but they're also a little worried of the workload and issues of switching textbooks and stuff like that. So,
do y'all see, in anybody that's done it on their campus, do you see a big difference with adoption between freshman and sophomore versus upper level classes with OER adoption? Is there a big divide or gap?
So at College Station, the traditional OERs like OpenStax are obviously very intro course heavy, right? And so we see that. We But when you get, then you see sophomore and junior classes, you don't see a lot of OERs. And then you see kind of custom made course packs or readings or something for those higher level courses again. So that's the kind of thing you see sometimes. Once in a while you get beyond that, but boy, sometimes it's hard to get those middle kind of courses in the middle, you know, like Madeleine, if you can imagine, because I'm sure you took the class. Texas A&M College Station, and probably you, used the exact same organic chemistry book that I did 35, 40 years ago. It's just another edition. So it's hard to move people sometimes. Yeah, it's just crazy.
I'll add on to what Bruce said there a little bit. Obviously, when we're looking at where high quality OER exists, so much of it really caters toward those introductory level classes that would be most appropriate for freshmen and sophomore. But on the other side of things, the faculty that I have the most interest and the most conversations with are very often teaching upper division or graduate level classes. And there's a lot of demand from faculty for OER that would be a good fit for classes like that, but not a lot of supply to meet that demand at this point. So like Bruce was saying too, we end up moving more toward creating kind of a version of a course pack to meet those needs, but there's not a lot of true open materials out there that would meet their course objectives, unfortunately.
You know, if I were king of the world, Texas is developing a pretty strong and big community of people that are interested in promoting OERs. I can go into any department and find some idiot that's willing to write an OER. You know, just maybe it's an APT, non-tenure track. It is so much work that, oh my gosh, you just got to really question their sanity. But if I could find 2 or 3 people across Texas that might collaborate together, it is a lot easier to write 3 or 4 chapters than it is to write an entire book. And that's where I think the next thing that goes, if you wanted to fill in those more upper division courses, is form collaborative teams across both community colleges and 4-year colleges, and see if you can just find enough people that would together be, 5, 6 people, and everybody take a chunk. For instance, so I've taught geology for forever, and if I was looking at an intro geology book, if I could write the chapters that were related to my research area, my specialty, my knowledge, oh man, I can crank those out and no problems. If I had to start writing about plate tectonics, or I'm a soil scientist, so if I started writing about structural geology, it's a nightmare because I don't know that stuff. And so it's these collaborative teams that you might be able to form across Texas, especially if you could get also buy-in from professional societies where you're actually saying, say take some oceanography professional society or earth science professional society and say, okay, we're going to do a Texas-based initiative to have OERs across the entire degree program of marine biology, right? And then you've tried to find enough marine biologists to help, and where they'd all chip in a little bit. That's the next thing I think that if you really wanted to scale up and meet these missing OERs, is the way to go.
So Madeline, you need to put that on your radar for your PhD.
There you go.
After you finish your dissertation, you can start writing an OER textbook on bacteria.
So I asked about open education for a real specific reason. Speaking of stuff with graduate education, but when I started involving my PhD students in educational projects along with their geochemistry projects, that's when 100% of my students got hired at tenure track jobs. I went from almost 0 to 100% because my students could go in at a university and just go, okay, you want to talk about educational initiatives? Let's talk. And my students could talk about OERs and all these other things. So the involving graduate programs in OER programs is really good. You guys know the National Science Foundation, for instance, has broader impact requirements for every NSF award. Every one of those broader impact programs could be geared towards OER development. Every one of them. And it's easy, and you'll get great reviews. You'll help your people get funded, students get funded, and then the PhD students go off and learn something that actually will help them get a job. Yeah. I don't know how many people had experience teaching before you started teaching. I was not one of them. Anyway, cool. Anyway, well, great presentation. I have to give a talk at a library publishing forum about TDL OJS program, like in 15 minutes. So I guess I should probably think about that.
Well, break a leg, Bruce. And
yeah, thanks, guys.
Thanks
David and Madeline and Nathan, thank you very much for organizing the session. It was excellent. Yeah, talk to you guys later.
Bye, Bruce.
Do we have other questions to consider? Anybody on, I think at this point, we're on any topic on OER. We got a good group here.
I'm not seeing questions in the chat. I mean, there's some resource sharing and idea sharing happening. And I've been capturing some of those resources as they've come in. And I did want to mention that Mark at South Plains or South Texas, I forget where you're at, Mark, but you've been, South Plains, you've been working on some OER textbook creation in teams and pairs. And I really love that. And I know there was the Texas Higher Ed Coordinating Board had a grant out to fund creation of OERs in the Department of Education at the federal level too. And so I would just say, think of us as your community. And if you need a partner or partners to work on a grant or OER initiative, please think of us here today.
You know, Nicole had posted a question, I don't know that it got responded to, was about whether anyone's gotten student pushback from OER, or whether it seems that it's just a matter of informing students of the OER efforts and then facilitating their access. Has anybody experienced that? I'm not sure if I have exactly. I mean, I think we initiated a big inclusive access program, and if not everybody's maybe familiar with inclusive access, but that's basically the publisher's latest response to OER essentially, and it's a way of providing course materials on the first day of class. But the way they do that is they basically charge every student up front a course materials fee when they register for the class. So students have already paid for the textbook. They can then opt out and get a refund from the institution, but we find that opt-out rates are really low at HCC. And what students are getting is basically an ebook and access to a publisher's LMS or homework management system. But what I was surprised by was how, when I talked to SGA representatives, was that I had thought that once I told them about OER versus inclusive access, that they would be really, they would get the difference, but they don't. Like our SGA was really like, they thought inclusive access was a great thing. So that was kind of surprising to me. I had expected to get a little bit more, at least sort of preference for OER from the students.
Yeah, similarly at UT Austin, certainly I haven't had any pushback related to OER. I think that if anything, it's a matter of helping them understand what it is, Nicole, to the point that you made in your question, explaining the difference between OER and other types of free resources is helpful, especially if I'm trying to empower them to talk about OER to administrators on our behalf. But certainly not any pushback. I think, I can't remember who said it earlier. I think it was Bruce, like nobody wants the thing that costs more money. So if you're leading with the affordability angle, I just don't hear that. But similar to Nathan, inclusive access is a pilot on our campus right now, and it's expanding. And there've already been some opinion pieces in our student newspaper expressing opposition to it in favor of OER, though it's not a cause that our student government has taken up at this point. So we'll see what reception is like when it rolls out more broadly, but it's still quite small scale on our campus.
Madeline and I just participated in sort of an introduction to OER for the faculty here on the Galveston campus. And we had a couple of faculty that were using publisher materials. And we also had the director of the bookstore involved as well. And a lot of the concern seems to be with the difference between OER and something that's coming from a publisher is the ancillary materials. Whether it's true or a perception that OER just really doesn't have the same ancillary. Can anyone talk to that perception?
I definitely hear that a lot too. And I try to be realistic. I think that they're right in many cases. If you're looking outside of the big OER publishers like OpenStax, the number of ancillary materials, especially those homework platforms that many faculty and students enjoy, just aren't there yet. I do see that changing over time, but I try to empathize if that's what's most important to them. I get it if OER doesn't seem like the right fit for the moment.
Agreed. And that's generally where we see the pushback at HCC is from faculty who, say, look, I can't teach without using this resource or something like it. And, yeah, I mean, I defer to them because they're the experts and I want them to teach with what they think is the best learning materials. But I do try to emphasize, I mean, the way I put it is that I think that if you use the entire package of materials that a publisher gives you and you teach with that there is a certain loss of agency and control over your own classroom that you get. You're just transmitting information from one source to the students. And I feel like a more dynamic teaching method is one where the professor is creating materials that are directly relevant to students, and students are having an impact in the classroom in a way that's a genuine back and forth. And I just don't see that happening with homework management systems. But that I don't push too hard on that. It's just to kind of try to get people to think about things differently.
I'd say this is Mark at South Plains. The thing that, and we're just getting started, but the thing that we get a lot of pushback is actually from faculty and not on the quality. The largest one that came out of Faculty Senate recently was the college is going to lose so much revenue from the little bit of revenue we get from the bookstore for the selling of textbooks. And it's more of an education issue because while you would be losing some revenue, it's such a minuscule amount in the grand scheme of like a college budget. And when you inform of that and then you say, yes, it seems like a big number, but then you look at the total budget, right? And then you turn around and you say, and the difference is we're reducing additional costs for students by 80 or 85% in terms of course materials. That's a huge net win. Just if you just market that, just have your marketing department put that up there and market it. That would, I think, go a long ways. And like I said, we're just getting started. And so Of course, as the library director, I was kind of voluntold that I was going to be running this thing, and we're glad to get started. But I thought that was an interesting perspective that people may come across is, yes, you hear the quality argument, and I agree that while there are, I guess, gaps, those are filling in pretty rapidly from what I can see. And also just in general, you need to be looking at a whole bunch of different areas. You're not going to go to just one source to get everything like they have in the past. So there's legwork too, and I think there's resistance to that work or the change. But the big thing we see is this pushback, oh, we're going to lose so much revenue, and then how are we going to fund things? And I don't know if it was discussed earlier because I came on a little bit late, but one of the funding mechanisms we're kicking around as an idea is to, if a course is OER, have a very small per credit hour or per course fee that would go to support Blackboard, all the open resources, or if a teacher wants an ebook that isn't, like you could get through EBSCO, another vendor, and it costs, say, $1,000 a year to provide access, we would fund it that way and not pass that student dollar for dollar on to the student. So anyways, that's probably enough for me, but I just wanted to share that perspective.
You're in really good company here, Mark, with all the folks on the call. So don't forget to put out the call for help if you ever get into a thorny issue. I do want to mention we're a couple minutes before our scheduled end time. So for those of you who are peeling off, we have a few events we want to make sure you're aware of. And I'm going to paste it into chat here. And we'll also follow up, make sure I paste it in the right thing. We'll also follow up with an email to everyone who's here today and everyone who registered with slides, our community notes, and these references or resources that we've shared in chat. So keep an eye out for that. And then once the recording is captioned, and we'll publish on our YouTube, and you can check it out there. Dave or Ashley or Madeline or Nathan, did you have any parting thoughts?
Other than to thank everyone for being here. This was wonderful. I really love these conversations and the ideas that came out of everything. And certainly thank you, Leah, for all your hard work on this. It's been amazing.
Thanks, everyone. Nice to see you.
Thanks so much, Nathan. Madeline, Ashley, excellent job. Dave, awesome.
Thank you, everyone.
We'll see y'all again soon.